Good afternoon, folks. What remarkable times we live in. My name is Tim Hopkins, and on behalf of the City Club of Idaho Falls, I welcome you to today's program with Paulette Jordan, the Democrat candidate for the United States Senate, opposing Senator James Risch. Let me take a moment to thank the sponsors of today's program: the Idaho National Laboratory, the Bank of Idaho, Fluor Idaho, Idaho State University, the Idaho Humanities Council, Mountain View Hospital, and KISU-FM. Thank you also to the great team of professionals at IE Productions who have assisted us in presenting today's virtual program. In the interest of the health and safety of our members, we will continue this format for City Club programs for the foreseeable future. And I remind you that we have two scheduled. Thursday, October 13th, we will present a debate between candidates for Idaho State Representative District 33A, Barbara E. Hart and Miranda Marquette. And shortly thereafter, Thursday, October 15th, we will host the candidates for the Idaho State Representative for District 33B, Marco Erickson and Dave Roth. I remind you that to find out about future City Club events, you should visit ifcityclub.com. This program will also be posted on Facebook and the IE Productions YouTube page. A link to the program will be available via the City Club website. The City Club of Idaho Falls is an independent, nonpartisan forum for the discussion of public affairs made up of our local members and always open to guests. The club exists to sponsor and promote civil dialogue and discourse on all matters of public interest, and strives to do so in a nonpartisan and non-sectarian manner, while encouraging broad participation by the community at large. We invite our audience to be part of the discussion and remind you we are accepting questions for today's program. Please write in your questions in the Facebook chat stream, and our moderator will present them to the speaker. The moderator for today's program will be Dr. David Adler. Dr. Adler is the president of the Alturas Institute and a recipient of numerous teaching, writing, and civic awards. He has lectured nationally and internationally and published on the Constitution, presidential power, and the Bill of Rights. He is the author of 6 books and more than 100 scholarly articles published in leading journals in his field. He is currently writing a book on the landmark Supreme Court decision, Reed versus Reed, which had its origins in Idaho and transformed the law for American women, a case argued before the court by the late Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Adler's scholarly writings have been quoted by the United States Supreme Court, lower federal courts, and by Republicans and Democrats alike in both houses of Congress. Adler has taught courses on the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the Supreme Court at all 3 universities in the state of Idaho, and he was professor of political science and director of the Center for Constitutional Studies at Idaho State University. He remains an adjunct professor at the University of Idaho College of Law, and in 2010, he was the recipient of the Idaho Humanities Council's Distinguished Humanities Award. Dr. Adler earned his BA from Michigan State University and his PhD from the University of Utah. And, importantly, he is a founding member of the City Club of Idaho Falls. Dr. Adler?
Thank you very much, Tim, for that generous introduction. Greetings, everybody, and let me add my welcoming remarks to all of you who are joining us here at City Club for a very distinguished speaker, a candidate for the United States Senate. Paulette Jordan is the Democratic nominee for the United States Senate. As Tim indicates, she is running against Senator Jim Risch. You should know, of course, that the City Club had hoped to stage a debate between Senator Risch and Ms. Jordan. Senator Risch declined, and thus we have offered this time to Ms. Jordan so that she could share her views with Idahoans. For many of you, Paulette Jordan is no stranger. She's traveled the length and breadth of Idaho for the past several years. As many of you know, in 2018, she was the Democratic nominee for governor of Idaho, and in that particular post, she was the first woman, and indeed the first Native American woman ever to have been a candidate for the governor of Idaho. And, of course, she has served 2 terms in the Idaho legislature representing District 5 from northern Idaho, where she joins us today, a graduate at the University of Washington, a nationally known speaker promoting women's rights and the rights of indigenous people, a candidate for the Senate who is campaigning on a number of major issues, which we're going to explore today. And let me take this minute then to say thank you to Paulette Jordan for joining us today. We're happy to hear your remarks now for 20 minutes or so, and then I'll return and pitch some questions. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you, David, and thank you, everyone. And good afternoon to everyone out there. I'm Paulette Jordan. I appreciate this amount of time, so I'm going to do my best to be very respectful of the time and, of course, take all of it as I can. And thank you for being here. For those of you who are joining us from afar, Zoom has really opened up this space quite remarkably, so I'm extremely grateful that we can get our message to you in this time frame. But before I begin, I first want to express that we cannot ignore the big news of the day, that President Trump and the First Lady have tested positive for COVID, as have other members of his inner circle and his staff, and some of the people who attended the Rose Garden ceremony when the president nominated his choice for the Supreme Court. And like all of you, I would want to wish the president and the First Lady and his team a speedy recovery, as I am additionally concerned because we have never had a commander-in-chief of the most powerful country in the world to be sick, much like this. For the rest of us, this must serve as an important reminder that we have not beaten COVID yet, and it continues to ravage the country, and we're even seeing upticks here in Idaho. Just yesterday, there were 4 new deaths in Idaho and 366 new cases of coronavirus in the state, which is far too many. And in fact, there's been a surge, which is an average of 481 new cases per day over the last week. And there's another 78% increase since the last 2 weeks. And we are going up in terms of cases in Idaho, which is why I want to make sure that our people who are watching are able to stay vigilant on this issue by wearing masks and keeping socially distant. As we're going along our day-to-day route in this campaign, doing our tours, we are wholly mindful of reminding people that we must do our part to be respectful, to listen to the experts, and of course to do our part to make sure that we're all staying healthy in this pandemic. And so that being said, I just want to start off by saying all of that. I want to also now start by telling you all a little bit about myself and why I'm running. First of all, I'm a member of the Coeur d'Alene tribe, running to be Idaho's first female senator and the country's first Native American woman in the U.S. Senate. And I will say that it's about time, because this has been many decades in the process, but also for me, many generations in the process, coming from a line of chiefs who are also men and women together. And we served in this egalitarian fashion, which is very unique to this country. I'm born and raised Idahoan, for those who have never met me. I'm a proud mother. I grew up on my family farmlands. I'm here with my 2 sons in northern Idaho. And of course, because I was raised on these family farmlands that I've inherited, I stem from a generation of people who have been here for thousands of years and have cultivated this area. And because we have a strong interest in ag, we also have a strong interest in ranching and continuation of cultivating this land. So I have a very deep connection and very deep roots to the ag industry here. I'm also a business owner, businesswoman. I'm largely focused on tribal economic development as the chair, the national division for serving the tribes economically. And I'm also very big on energy development. I studied at the University of Idaho in terms of the economic policy and planning in coordination with Canada. And it's a remarkable program for legislative leaders. And so I benefited from that arena. And I'm very grateful to see that we have more people who are interested or taking an interest in clean energy. And being that I'm a mother too, I will say that I would not be here if they were not agreeable for me to be on this journey. It would certainly would not be a place for me if they did not drive me to continue on with my purpose here. Because as a mother, I know that it is critically important that people know that we cannot leave our land and our society for future generations in the hands of those who we disagree with or who do not hold what we hold sacred to be respected. And of course, to go back a little bit further, I want to start in 2008 when I joined my tribal council in 2009, and then later ran for the legislative seat in 2014 and was able to represent my home district here in District 5, despite tough odds, as many have said, because I was able to unseat an Republican incumbent and have successfully then won another term. But while in office, more importantly, I fought to see some shifts in policy, and many of the changes have included important areas, such as including expansion of healthcare, which we have been successful in 2018 expanding healthcare. I also fought to promote access to rural broadband and rural resource centers, clean energy, teacher loan forgiveness, criminal justice reform, environmental protection, and of course, economic development in Idaho's most economically suppressed communities, many of whom are still struggling today. In 2018, as Mr. Adler has stated, I was the Democratic gubernatorial candidate for Idaho. I became the first woman nominated to that position by a major party in our state, and of course, the first Native American woman nominated by a major party for governor in U.S. history. And that race, I will tell you all, really brought not only a great deal of national attention to a presumptively, quote, safer state in our election, but it was also exciting for our state to see a race that brought in more votes than any other Democratic gubernatorial congressional candidate in Idaho's history. And even though unsuccessful, we were successful in the other battles that were on the ballot, and we're continuing to build on that movement today. And as we see that healthcare, as we were struggling to ensure that we had expanded Medicaid in 2018, and having won that battle, we are still continuing on ensuring that people with pre-existing conditions will be covered under health insurance. And now we know that the ACA and those with pre-existing conditions are on the chopping block. We have a greater risk or threat looming over us, and therefore, we want to continue on championing this voice, continue on fighting for this cause. So the battle really truly never ends. And I will tell you that as Indigenous peoples whom I have stemmed from, we are largely independent, and we're really ultimately about the people, which is why I believe that my message has really stemmed from a good place and has reached across both sides of the aisle very well. We have a language based on verbs and action and how we relate to one another versus the English language, which is based on nouns, which is not so much about action, but we offer a new style of leadership that this country has never seen before. And because I stem from this legacy of leaders, this is the type of leadership that I want to offer to this country. And of course, it's long overdue that women in our state and in our country step into the highest leadership positions in government, a state that is over 50% women, whom I hope will step up and take on this battle with me to see our state come into the light when it comes to equality for both men and women, as we are still a state amongst this nation that is poorly rated in terms of how we pay our women in the workforce, in the business sector, and also women in representation of government and even in the business sector. But we have a ways to go for women having access to healthcare in our state. And because we're coming from such a low place, so far from allowing women to have body sovereignty or the ability to control their own life and not have government continue to persist in telling our women what to do, invading our private lives in such a way. I think this is a grand opportunity for us to really present to many of our young women that this is an opportunity for us to sway or switch our state back in the right direction via this U.S. Senate seat. But like many Indigenous communities who are very aware, women have been leading for centuries. And as matriarchs, as our people, as chiefs, I see that we have an opportunity to show through my own example, walking this path, how very real this opportunity is for many of us. So now I want to move on to the good Senator Risch and really talk about why Mr. Risch, being a senator in office, has threatened the very fabric of our democracy. Mr. Risch has spent 11 years in the Senate and still has no legacy to stand on. And of the 44 years in public office, which is more than half his life, and of course, many more years than my own life, I will tell you that nobody in Idaho is better off. And no one in Idaho is better off than him. He has grown to be a very rich man while in public office, which raises many questions, including moral questions. And I will tell you that it is a danger to our democracy when people take this position to enrich themselves and sit in silence and sleep on the job, which has been very well shown and expressed and indicated over this last few years. And of course, Mr. Risch is the embodiment of everything that's wrong with the culture of Washington, D.C. I think those folks who are caught in the middle or those who are on the left and the right can see that we certainly desire a significant change in our country as we've seen the division and the hate and the corporate corruption and the greed that has driven us apart from the national to the local level, and how that's getting into our homes and impacting working families and our young children. But I will tell you that Mr. Risch is really only after two things, and that's status and money. He works to enrich himself and has shown so over the many years, if you will look at his accounts and records. And somehow he became a millionaire while in public office. And in order to keep himself in office, he works for big corporate interests rather than what the people of Idaho need and want. And so if you go to his FEC filings, you will see that very few of his campaign donations come from within Idaho. In fact, over 90% of those contributions are outside of Idaho. I would say a majority of his donors are corporate PACs and CEOs of large companies. And the corporate interests that he caters to directly conflict with the best interests of Idahoans. And worst of all, he has either been silent or asleep to his responsibility to assert any checks or balances on the executive branch of government, let alone in his position as the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. And so while Mr. Risch is asleep at the wheel, shirking his responsibilities in these executive seats, I'll tell you that he is also a sheep. And I've said this from the very beginning, because many people in Idaho know that when we lack leadership that's willing to do their job or to participate in the conversation that we're having here in Idaho for the needs of our people, you wonder, where is our leader and what's happening at the national level? What are they doing? Where are they at? Why are they not present? But this individual is a partisan sheep, and that's certainly worked against all of us here in our state. And whether you're Republican or Democrat or independent, you definitely know that a sheep who is willing to just fall to the wayside of the partisanship is certainly not serving any Idahoan to their best interest, and is certainly not upholding their oath to the Constitution. But I will tell you that when you have a partisan sheep that is siding with their party, choosing himself over the people of Idaho, that this is why we lack a moral leader. And he does not welcome all voices to the table. This is why we have to change Idaho. And I will tell you, this is also why at every single event that we host, many Idahoans who are turning out, whether online or in person, are sharing that they are fed up. And this is the vast majority of Idahoans who are fed up. But they know that we need leadership that's going to match the vibrancy of our great state. And people know that even on Risch's best day, that he has been very uninspiring and wholly uninterested in what we need here and what could actually help our communities. And at the very worst, he is corrupt as he is settled for enriching his own net worth rather than fighting for the people of Idaho. And I state this very simply because that is the truth of the matter. And unfortunately for us, in this time, in this pandemic, and the financial crisis that we face, and the climate crisis that we face, and of course, even this race war that is looming over us in a state that is filled with so much hatred. But Mr. Risch is also never here. I will point out that he certainly needs to come here to Idaho. We've challenged him with many debates. He has certainly a lot of explaining to do, which is why we challenged him to 4 debates, which he has not even given us the courtesy of responding to. And of course, he needs to explain why he doesn't agree with the oversight on COVID relief and why he was silent as the administration botched the planning and execution of a plan to address this public health emergency. Why he supports the privatization of our public lands that we love so much. Many people who move here to Idaho love our public lands and they want to share this with their children. And why would we give that away? Why would we privatize it or sell it off? He needs to explain his ties to Big Pharma. Why the cost of prescription drugs goes through the roof for many of our seniors and many of our military veterans. Explain why he is so willing to enable the destruction of our environment as though having clean air and water is not a necessity for future generations. And explain his silence on the issues that matter most to Idahoans. And right now he's dodging a live debate with me through the KTVB, who have offered a debate, much like the City Club. Also, the Idaho Public Television Network has offered a live debate, and of course, he has only responded to a Q&A, which is a set standard, but not a debate. And so I would say that while he's dodging these debates with me because he doesn't want to have to answer to Idahoans for his record, which he should, Idahoans must be paying attention and know that we have all had enough. We're fed up with this blind subservience to the party and to the corporations. And I want to make this very, very clear that my issue with my Republican challenger is that he has failed miserably to respect the tradition of independence, which has always been the best of Idaho politics. And those traditions are now more respected by senators like Mitt Romney than they are by Mr. Risch. And I have a bone to pick with Mr. Risch, and I guarantee you, he has never had an opponent like me. When you are meeting with any organization or small businesses or people all along our state who are waiting in the unemployment line, or who are those who are facing evictions and those who are food insecure in many of our communities across the state, even those right now who are facing evictions come January, I will tell you that while unemployment is even at an all-time high, wages in Idaho are among the lowest in the US, and yet Risch sits in silence. And he also knows the damage he has done here in Idaho when it comes to education, and education in our state, which is rated amongst the worst in the country. And yet our current senator spends more time thinking about how to please other countries than he does about the needs of Idahoans. And the fact is the policies that Risch is bringing forward don't help you at all. They don't put people first. They cut taxes for the rich. They cripple Idaho farming industries and export our jobs to foreign countries. And Risch has no idea what it's like to be a hardworking Idahoan struggling to get by. And I'll tell you, when I meet with any of these organizations, they're all struggling to get by. And yet he has demonstrated time and time again that he doesn't care. And he has no passion for making life better for the people of our state. And again, for even those who have signed up, who are waiting in lines that are 2 years out for our homeless shelters. But I'll tell you that we know what we need in order to get our country back. And we're not going to get it with a man satisfied with sleeping while democracy is at risk. We need a leader that will be a voice for the people's best interest and put people first. And when we are dealing with a pandemic as such that threatens each of our lives, and we are forging policy to help recover our working class, when we are trying to save our post offices, protect our public lands, our resources, saving our salmon, when we are dealing with an administration that fears accountability in COVID relief spending, firing our inspectors general and watchdogs, a president that is withdrawing membership from a World Health Organization during a pandemic that requires the entire world to work together, I will tell you that it is unacceptable that the President of the United States failed to take a stand against the white supremacy terrorist organization and the vigilantes that are following suit, just as it is that Senator Risch has been silent. And as many of us know, silence is complicity. And as one of Idaho's ambassadors to the rest of the country, given his role in the Senate, there is absolutely no excuse for him to stay silent. And I will tell you, with many experiences that I've had here in North Idaho, especially with my children who have been on a bus playing in a late night football game and having been shot at in the middle of the night as they're heading back to this local reservation, a tribal community, and no one has said anything about this issue. And this is within a few weeks ago. And because this is happening today and now, and we have zero leadership taking accountability and speaking up for our communities, the silence not only speaks volumes, such as Senator Risch's, but choosing to be a part of this, these acts of hate and terrorism. Our community doesn't deserve this. Our children deserve better. They should live in peace. They should be able to live feeling secure. And I'll tell you that Senator Risch has chosen to be not only complicit in all of these acts of terrorism, but also to be a subsidiary of the White House, a lapdog, an enabler. And this is a complete abdication of his responsibility as a US Senator. And then the oath that he took, the promises he made to Idahoans. And with that, I'll end there because I, again, want to be respectful of everyone's time. But I want to make sure to make these points and state this much because this is a very heated time for our community, especially when we are seeing voter suppression and disenfranchisement. And we're seeing these acts in our community that are harming our children, and yet no one is speaking up. And these are very real circumstances for many of our people. And as a candidate running for US Senate, as I've gone all over our state, hearing the voices of our community, these are very heavy thoughts and very heavy concerns. And yet all of them are asking, where is our leadership? And that is more than 1,000 reasons why we deserve a new leader, a better senator who's willing to listen and answer to every single Idahoan and help them in this cause as we move forward, because we do have to work harder to bring our country back together. And here in Idaho, we have a very real opportunity to do so. So with that, thank you, Mr. Adler, and thank you all for joining us. And of course, I am open to taking on some questions if you have them.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan. We appreciate your remarks, and again, we apologize that Senator Risch was unwilling to participate in a debate with you. The public would have profited from the sharp give and take between the two of you, but we're delighted to have you here today. You depicted your opponent as a man asleep at the wheel, as a man who represents a senator who engages in excessive deference to the president, who has been unwilling to speak out on behalf of women's rights, and among other things, as a senator who has supported the Republicans' lawsuit to topple Obamacare, the Affordable Health Care Act. Let's turn to a couple of the issues to see if we can further sharpen the differences you have with your opponent. Let's turn to health care first. As you pointed out, Senator Risch is supportive of the lawsuit, which will be heard by the Supreme Court in a month or so, to topple Obamacare. And among the casualties, if that lawsuit succeeds at the High Court, will be the elimination of protection for pre-existing conditions. How vital is that protection for everyone, but also women and single mothers and others in our state and across the country? Could you address that, please?
Yes, and as a single mother who has fought for healthcare in the state since my inception into public office in 2014, I will tell you that it is no easy task in protecting this issue, but it is a very important one to me, which is why it's my #1 issue in this campaign, as in 2018. Healthcare, for those of you watching, is on the ballot. As we know, with the loss of Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, who has fought for equality and access to healthcare for many of us, it's a very real issue today. And of course, this is one of the primary issues I think that most folks are facing, especially knowing that if the ACA is dismantled here in November, as soon as they are able to launch comments and a hearing right after the election night, I'm wholly concerned that 100 million people in this country will lose access to healthcare. But not only that, those folks with pre-existing conditions, and it has been declared to me that those who have contracted COVID, and that's roughly around 7 million people in this country, will be counted in that category as having a pre-existing condition. So when it comes to healthcare, it's very important to me, of course, a livelihood that I wanted to make sure that we protect. But to Senator Risch, he believes that healthcare companies do a good job of regulating themselves, and that no matter what it costs to us, he has certainly, as you stated, voted for and co-sponsored every attempt to repeal the ACA, despite Idahoans' overwhelming support to expand Medicaid. And like you know, many of us here in Idaho who were part of the big battle to expand Medicaid, over 61% of Idahoans declared their support. And that meant people coming from the left and the right. And I would say that he is clearly not listening to us here in our great state and has ignored every single voter who has come out to champion this cause. But despite this overwhelming support, I'm appalled that he would want to challenge or even take on this issue and work against us. But again, we'll say that over almost half of all American adults and roughly 260,000 Idahoans have pre-existing conditions. So I know we're talking about a good chunk of our people, and to leave them out of this conversation, would not only devastate many lives, but would harm many of our communities. I will tell you that 90% of all Medicare recipients are taking one or more prescriptions, and under Rish's watch, all of them could be denied healthcare. In Idaho, 37% of Idahoans have stopped taking a prescription drug as prescribed by their doctor due to cost. So, we're not only dealing with the healthcare issue, but also the cost, the rising costs of prescription drugs. And Risch wasn't there when we expanded Medicaid ourselves, but instead of standing with constituents, he's just continuing to work with programs to gut our healthcare and even for our elderly. And he voted to cut Medicaid by $1 trillion and Medicare by $500 billion, so that millionaires and corporations can get a tax cut. But Mr. Adler, I'll tell you that one of the problems that I see is that healthcare infrastructure of the United States is not set up to gather data that we need to make smart decisions. And the problem is our people last healthcare policy not only fails to prioritize or even measure effectiveness of the application of patient care, but that it's all profit driven. And so I'd say that in the past 10 years since the passage of Obamacare, we really have a great deal of work here to do. And since then, of course, our country have spent over $22 trillion on services for the chronically ill, and yet the transformation needle has barely moved. And while the ACA was helpful for some, it still demonstrated yet again that the transform of healthcare in America cannot be done piecemeal, and it must be re-engineered from the ground up. I state this because I know that for many of those who are thinking that the ACA should be dismantled and must go away, thinking that there's going to be a solution on the other side, I will tell you that there is no solution. Whether President Trump says in some way that he has an option, they have never, in all the 4 years he has been in that administration, ever offered an option that is better than the ACA. So I will support the idea and, of course, the continuation of Medicare because we have to continue funding it. And we, for those who are not aware, we are running out of funding. They have not supported the refunding of Medicare over the next 2 years. And so we are in a very unfortunate position. But we have to make sure that we elect the right leaders that will come in and protect Medicare, but also ensure that the ACA is there for everyone so that we have health insurance options and that we are able to cover those with pre-existing conditions as that number continues to grow, especially here in Idaho. And we also have a legislature here in our state that is also working to implement working conditions on top of the Medicaid option, but of course, many of us know that that has never worked, especially for a state like Kentucky. It actually has kicked out more people into the healthcare gap. So that has not worked and is not a good idea. But as we're facing this at the national level, we still even have those to look at within. So we are going to face a healthcare battle either way we look, whether at the national level or at the local level. But here nationally, we do have an opportunity to fight for the ACA and fight for Medicare. And so I want to make sure that people understand that this issue is very much so on the ballot come November 3rd. And of course, if you vote early, it'll be waiting for you because we have to stand strong on this issue for everybody.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan, for your remarks on that critical issue, which, by the way, national polls tell us is the #1 issue for most Americans. You've also emphasized throughout your campaign the importance of protecting the environment. And just today, you did mention climate change. You mentioned the need to promote clean energy. Let's take a couple of minutes and ask you to elaborate a little bit on how you would like to protect the environment and how that folds into your energy ideas for the future of America.
Well, thank you for the question. And with COVID-19, we're now able to see the fragility of our societies to global shocks. We've seen this with the pandemic, not only the healthcare crisis, but we're now seeing with our wildfires. And so we need to use the pandemic recovery as a basis for understanding the profound opportunity we have worldwide to address climate change. Senator Risch was asked by a group of BSU students the other day that what he can do as chairman of the Senate Committee on Foreign Relations to create a conversation around global cooperation on climate change. And his response is that he didn't know that there was anything that anybody can do about it, and that there's this debate on the cause of it. And he's not buying into the science that man-made emissions of CO2 are at the cause. And so Senator Risch then kicked the can down the road, saying that we're handing this off to you, saying that it's up to our children, not up to him, as if he couldn't do anything about this today in this day and age. So I hope that you'll have the answer, or as he has stated, he is trying to kick this can off to our children, but also saying that he hopes that our children will have the answer to do the work that he is not willing to do today. And of course, I realize that one of the other challenges is that when we have a senator that isn't willing to acknowledge climate science, that does put us at even more so at greater risk. But even being more so willing to put the corporations at the forefront and allowing them to have their opportunities to extract our natural resources and corrupting our state without regulations, without being held accountable, does put us even at greater risk. And of course, the fact is that climate change in Idaho, while it's changing, the way we see everything from the wildfires to our snowpack that is melting earlier in the year, and the flow of meltwater into the streams during the summer that is declining. In the coming decades, we're going to see our streams becoming warmer and warmer, and populations of several fish species that we have worked over this last year to protect that will continue to decline, like our sacred salmon, our steelhead, our trout, and many other cold water fish. Wildfires have become more and more common as we know it. I've been meeting with those in McCall, many of our foresters who are giving us great updates about what's happening, but it's just becoming increasingly, a more and more challenging issue to mitigate. And as our deserts are expanding and water is becoming more and more scarce, this is becoming a greater issue for many people to understand that climate change is a very real issue. And because of irrigation issues, our Idaho agriculture, a massive industry here, has certainly posed or has faced this very real issue. So climate change poses challenges even for our farmers, or their livestock and crops, reducing crop yields. I've seen that within my own backyard where, we're seeing reduction in our yield as an ag landowner here. We're seeing decline in summer stream flow, which has reduced the water available for irrigation for our farmers all throughout Idaho. And so I would, again, just speaking to some of the reality, one of the challenges that I see is not only presenting a clean energy plan of the future, utilizing the opportunities and the research that we have in our great state, but also I would immediately co-sponsored a bill, the forest management bill that we have seen, which is called the Emergency Wildlife and Public Fire Safety Act, that Senator Risch just signed on to this past week. And I think because of our urgency and our leadership that I had promoted this bill underneath Senator Daines from Montana. He finally, after a whole year of this bill sitting on his desk, decided to support it. And so, it really does require leadership to be at the helm, to acknowledge that we are facing all sorts of urgent needs that must be addressed. And I'm grateful that I could be there to actually push this man to do his job, but we can do better. And I believe that if we, look at all of these issues, such as even deploying a workforce to tackle our problems, that we would be in a much better shape, especially when we come to this season that we're in with fires. But I'm also honored to have been able to help found the DNC Climate Council, which has recognized me as a nationally recognized leader in environmental protection issues as an Indigenous woman, to help lead the way in balancing policymaking for our future generations. I've worked very hard for many years, both in government and in the private sector, to protect our public lands and work toward proper management of our forests. And as I stated, we have to really start implementing fuels management and looking to fire prevention, and much the same to protecting our natural resources and wildlife in Idaho. Like many Idahoans, I was raised on my land, on my family farm, on the Coeur d'Alene Reservation, and I realized how incredibly it is important to remain connected to the land. And we need leaders who respect our land and who are willing to combat corporate greed in order to address climate change. And we need policy that both protects our environment and contributes to economic prosperity. And there are many opportunities and options for us. And once elected, it is my promise, my continued commitment to work to ensure that clean energy investments occur in every community throughout the country, because this is not only a countrywide exchange, but this is a global commitment that we must become a part of, which is also why, we want to press that we have to re-engage in the Paris Climate Agreement, because our global contribution, which can be huge here in the United States, must be part of the overall goal to incentivize the adoption of future technologies in a way that helps our climate, especially the protection of our water, making sure that we're able to benefit not only all Idahoans, but every American across this country. We can lower costs for rooftop solar or electric transportation options, and all of these are promising ways to reduce emissions. But right now, these options are not financially accessible to many. And transitioning to a clean energy economy will bring many benefits, as many know, including well-paying jobs that Idaho is very well deserving, very well positioned to have. But we need to ensure that we put a stop to the rollback of protections, which is happening here in Idaho, and forge a strategic unified plan. So overall, I will say to you, Mr. Adler, and those watching, that leadership matters right here, right now, when it comes to climate change. This is a very real issue. And of course, protecting our environment and all of our public lands is going to be essential. And when I'm elected as senator, I will continue to work to protect our public lands and our environment for future generations, including the next 7 generations, as I often will relate to, because it's not just about our children here today, it's about our grandchildren and our children's children. So that is what I want to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Jordan. You've clearly demonstrated the differences between yourself and Senator Risch in areas of protecting the environment, on climate science. He denies climate science and the findings of climate scientists. Part of the issue of how to deal with the environment necessarily involves clean energy. You've spoken to that. Let's turn to a major organization within Idaho, and that, of course, is the Idaho National Laboratory, which you know well is a major economic driver in the state and conducts research that affects the very future of the nation and our national security. Would you tell us a little bit about your understanding of the role of INL in America's energy future, trending toward the promotion of our security going forward?
Yes, and as I've served in the state legislature on the Energy Environment Committee, I've learned a great deal about the INL, and I've taken many tours with the INL, and learned much about the research that they're doing. I'm very proud of the research that is coming out of our great state, and we can stand on the research and utilize what's being developed out of the INL for our future. And one of the greater points that I've learned about the INL is that we are offering our small grid systems. And since I was able to learn more about this energy opportunity as an option for our rural communities, I was growing more and more excited about this because I see that not only the small modular reactors being a great option in the future for clean energy solutions, but also seeing that small energy grid systems is really the way forward. I really want our people to be energy sovereign, and I have certainly pressed this amongst the community that I represent nationally with many of the tribes, and of course the 567 tribes that I have been elected to represent. Those voices are as very much asserted when it comes to being ambassadors, of being natural resource stewards, and because they are so strong in our commitment as I am. I think we have a great partnership in the INL when it comes to future technologies that will promote greater energy options, from biomass fuels to geothermal power, also solar power that's transferable and now utilized in greater authority with the military. We also see that the INL is starting to create many other options beyond what we're familiar with. And I'm excited to see all of these technologies come out of the INL, because I know that Idaho is well positioned to lead the way when it comes to energy technology, energy transformation, using these other energy systems or technologies, even battery technology like SEL offers as well, to essentially be able to subsidize clean energy with clean energy versus clean energy with carbon outputs such as oil or natural gas and coal. So I do see that we're in a good position with the INL, and I firmly support, much of the output and the research that's done, and very grateful.
Turning back to Senator Risch's role as chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, you shared with us his answer recently to students at BSU that he couldn't conceive of a way in which he or the United States could make a difference in addressing the problem of climate change. Is that a reflection, in your view, of a stunted vision of his role as chair of Senate Foreign Relations Committee? And how does that tie into your criticism of his excessive deference to the president in foreign affairs? And to extend this one more point, I apologize, what's your view on the fact that Senator Risch was unwilling to criticize Putin's action to place a target on the back of American soldiers in Afghanistan?
Yes. Well, to answer the prior two questions, I will say that it is simply lack of leadership. It's there's a deficit there for our country, and unfortunately, if we don't have a leadership in these positions that are very powerful, especially as chair of the Foreign Relations Committee, a committee that should be, which was once a very highly regarded committee. Because we are looking at someone who is to be in that position as a diplomat to represent our country and with many of these foreign relations, but also to keep us engaged in conversations of peace. And as I served with Senator John McCain, we actually went to a forum in Belgium, and it was very remarkable to hear him speak about NATO and how important it is for us to keep these peace relations. And because many of us are just sort of one step away from, a looming war from some countries who do want to work against us, or who are very greedy in terms of the corporate, the oil that they want to go after, or whatever other resource. And so being that it's a very delicate nature interacting with these relations of ours, foreign and domestic, it's important that we have a leader that's paying attention and that's going to be assertive rather than an enabler to the president, and will do whatever the president says. Because for us, it has to come down to an independent leader who is willing to think with utmost leadership and integrity, but without that action of morality to speak to the protection of people, both foreign and domestic, especially both for those who they represent, such as us here in Idaho. The greater challenge persists that this man is, again, as I've heard him basically wanting to kick the can down the road. I've heard him in many interviews where he has stated that this job has to be the easiest job, and therefore, he can be here forever. But for a man who's sleeping at the wheel, we can all tell why this man loves this job, why it's so easy. Having done nothing in 11 years and having nothing to really speak to his legacy, really, but only two bills within a total of 12 years being in the U.S. Senate, says a whole lot about what he has certainly not done in public office. But to, again, express how important it is to have a leader paying attention, and especially in this day and age where we are up against many threats internationally. And as you've stated, with Putin representing us, representing Russia, and of course coming here to try to dismantle our democracy, as many have said, that has continued to be a direct threat, not only to our country, but to many other countries. I think for him to not stand against the fact that he has attacked many of our military veterans, our military friends, relatives, and our men and women that we are here to protect as well, says a lot about him. And I'm actually appalled that he, as a leader, has said nothing about any of these issues, has said nothing about the attacks that the president has made on our military men and women, or even those from other countries. And of course, I'm still shaking my head when it comes down to the fact that not many have really spoken out against all of this that's happening on the Republican side. So, it's certainly shocking in this day and age that we're even allowing this to be normalized, or that this is okay. For many of us, we're paying attention, but it is also why we're running to unseat this individual. So it is my hope and intent to ensure that people understand that we do not have a representative, that we do not have a friend that is on the side of Idaho. And as these enemy threats are even within the walls of our country, it's just very delicate of a nature, a very sensitive election that is really coming upon us here on November 3rd.
Thank you very much. We're rapidly running out of time. I'd like to move through two or three more questions quickly, if we can. As you know, the New York Times ran a major story on Sunday disclosing the tax returns for President Trump, indicating, among other things, that he's something like $421 million in debt to a variety of organizations, including foreign countries. In your view, does that mean that the nation's leader in foreign affairs is vulnerable to foreign pressures, and does that concern you?
Well, wholly. I mean, same for Senator Risch. We look at what ties they have. We should be asking questions, digging deeper as far as these relationships that they're beholden to, and why it is that they are so wealthy, and where did this money come from? There's so many questions to be asking, and I hope that people are paying attention and willing to dig deep into this arena, because where your money comes from, where you're tied to, it does say a lot about you. But also with the president, I'm vastly concerned that we would have anyone to have so many ties all over the world as well. And I try not to be too critical at this time. I know that we have a president who is facing this threat on his life, and at his age and in his condition. But yet still, we do have many vulnerabilities in our president, who has certainly been tied in a negative way financially.
As you know, as the world knows, the president has been unwilling to commit to a peaceful transition of power in the event he loses in the election on November 3. And many Republican leaders have criticized him for his unwillingness, his refusal to make that commitment. But Jim Risch has been silent. What do you make of Jim Risch's silence on that issue?
Well, to me, silence is complicity. And a leader who is firm always speaks up on their wishes and, of course, their goodwill, and will say what they stand for. And, of course, not only speak to their values and what is not only their values but their principles, but actually take action and do one more and ensure that people understand that they firmly believe in what they say they believe in. So that's the whole notion, as my relatives would say, my grandfather would say, that a good leader walks their talk. And unfortunately, we're not seeing this individual walk his talk, nor even speak against these issues and these acts of terrorism.
As we reach the end of our time together, let me ask a final question. As you know, America is undergoing a racial reckoning of sorts in this country, and the nation is in many ways gripped by the turmoil of our historic problem with racism, directed toward all ethnic groups in our country. Most recently, just on Tuesday night in the debate with Vice President Biden, President Trump refused to denounce white supremacy. And I'm wondering what you would make of this refusal as a U.S. Senator to hear a sitting president refuse to denounce white supremacy in America.
I'll tell you what a lot of children are thinking right now. They're not only fearful for their lives, they actually are asking their parents, should we get a gun? Should I be worried about my life? Should I be worried about protecting our family? What does this mean for our future? And so while many of our people are now living in doubt and worrying, and of course having this fear permeate throughout their own livelihood, this is another concern that we have, aside from the COVID pandemic and the healthcare crisis we're facing, and the financial crisis we're facing. We have multiple crises, and of course, without leadership paying attention to these issues, and instead of focusing on who our next Supreme Court justices, they should be focusing on COVID relief funding. We have many people, as I stated before, who are facing evictions, who are facing healthcare crisis, who are food insecure, and yet as we have these growing numbers of people signing up for the homeless shelter, this is again a growing challenge that our people are facing, and we need leadership at the national level to focus on what matters most and bring COVID relief funding back to our state, back into our local communities. But yet we have now a president who is trying to distract the people in driving this issue to race, and is saying that he is not going to challenge white supremacy or declare them a terrorist organization, or even while the Republicans right now in the US Senate have stood against or blocked the passage of a resolution to condemn white supremacy as of yesterday. That's a very real concern. And why is it that, we have to ask ourselves this, but why is it that they are not willing to condemn this white supremacy terrorist group? And why is it that we are so focused on this issue right now? Because it's, it should not have been enabled or even given this much power in our lives. And unfortunately, like I said before, it's unfortunate because our children are faced with this issue and are wondering what is going to happen for their tomorrow, and are they safe? And I hope that our leadership, including the president, will denounce this. Of course, will stand against white supremacy. But I have actually called upon our U.S. Senator, Senator Risch, taking him to task to ask him to condemn white supremacy, which we have yet to hear from. It's been 3 days now. And I hope that he will come out at some point to condemn white supremacy in our state. As we know, if many of you have looked to this issue, Idaho does have the most hate groups per capita than any other state in the country. And so we're very well aware, especially in the rural sectors of our state, knowing what it has been like over this past year, as people are driving up and down the streets with their guns as vigilantes, claiming to protect their communities, but they're really more terrorizing these communities. So I'm concerned that we have folks who feel that they have to wear their guns on their hip, and they're coming from out of state or coming from wherever, trying to control our community through this fear, bullying people. And that is just not the Idaho way. But we certainly deserve leadership who is willing to push back and challenge all these folks who want to bring hate and division, into our communities, because we are a good people, and our people have certainly worked hard to continue to be about peace and to be very constructive in a positive way. But I want our culture to come back to being a good neighbor, being good Idahoans, being more loving and compassionate. And to me, I was raised by military veterans. My grandfather, a World War II hero, who has said that, we are not about hate. We are ambassadors of peace, and we must always be about being ambassadors of peace, not just for humanity, but for our lands and for our children's future. So that's where I sit. I hope that our president will come to terms and realize that this is not the way forward, that driving our country apart is not going to help our democracy. It's not going to help our generations to follow, nor does it help our relations internationally. As many people see the United States as a global leader, but have yet to see under the Trump administration us rise back into the ranks of leadership. So we have a long ways to go to build our reputation back up as a country. But I do know that it does matter for us to hold our local leaders accountable. And I hope that people hold our current senator, who is up for election now, now that his seat is vulnerable, that they will hold him accountable to the fact that we are facing a very real condition, a very real crisis, a war in some eyes, to peace relations because of this racial divide that is looming over us.
I want to thank you so very much for taking time out of your very busy campaign schedule in your race to become Idaho's next summer. And we wish we had more time. We look forward to following your campaign in the home stretch. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to remind you that the City Club's next program will be held on October 13, in which we feature a debate between Representative Barbara Ehart and the challenger Miranda Marquette. Please join us that day. As always, thanks to our sponsors. Good day. Long live the Republic.